Welcome to the podcast Only the Bare Facts, a bold voice of truth, integrity, and transparency in a chaotic world. This channel delivers unfiltered stories, real-life lessons, and a steadfast commitment to God's truth. Bear is a unique blend of grit and grace. What you see is what you get. His diverse interests have led to remarkable adventures and deep learning, all shared here in pursuit of truth amid deception. Through darkness and death, suffering and loss, to light and redemption, Bear's journey reflects his resilience, fortitude, and awakening to faith. Now a warrior for truth, Bear is on a mission to expose darkness, build authentic connections, and inspire others to embrace their divine identity with courage, authority, and authenticity as sons and daughters of God. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy this episode, hit like and share this podcast far and wide. Smash that subscribe button and let us know your thoughts by sending us an email or text message. Now sit back and let's dive in.
I'm absolutely honored to be able to have all you guys on the podcast today. It's just I'm speechless. I have wanted this to happen for quite a while. Like I said, Paul and I have had a number of conversations, and I'm grateful that he's been able to pull it together and get everybody on board all on the same day. I think it was about 3 years ago that you guys were on the Sean Ryan show, which shed a great deal of light on what you'd been through and what was going on and what you guys had to face. And I'm sure by the time this airs, you're going to be mainstream news. I mean, the notoriety and fame will be burning in the minds of all those people who have had an opportunity to read the book and see a lot of the interviews you guys are doing. It's mind-bending. I just touch on the book for a second. I mean, the injustice and blatant corruption, I mean, you guys faced from September 2007 all the way through to December 21st, 2020 is mind-blowing. I don't think you can get a full grasp of that, from any conversations that I've had with Paul over the last little while. Certainly didn't lead me into that knowledge or that understanding, and to read the book, Gina, was unbelievable. I mean, just to kind of pinpoint certain aspects and pieces, and I'm sure the story is, had to get filtered down a little bit to put it into a book that was readable for people, because I guess it was, the size of War and Peace, everybody would get lost, but the details were phenomenal. And I mean, just to, have that happen is it's amazing. I'm going to quote something that I saw on Facebook today, which was really cool. It said, "I'm simultaneously in the softest and most ruthless era I've ever been in." And that was Paul's wife posted that. So I'm going to start out with this, that this is something I haven't done before. So here goes to a new direction. A scripture came to me this morning, and it's Isaiah 40:31. And bear with me if you don't mind. I just want to read it. It says, "But those who entwine their hearts with God will experience divine strength, will rise up on soaring wings and fly like eagles, run their race without growing weary, and walk through life without giving up." In my humble opinion, you've all personified a level of fortitude and resilience that's exemplary. I mean, beyond what most people could ever have endured. Character assassinations, false allegations, corrupt witnesses, lying prosecuting teams, blatantly incompetent judges, with an obviously not so hidden agenda. Relentless disappointment. You endured incarceration and rose with hope and commitment to truth. But mostly, I want to point to the conversation towards where you guys are now, how dynamic that experience has changed you, and what parts of life it's affected you, and where you're headed in the future. Because people kind of get tangled up in the mess that it was. But the coolest part is, like I said, you guys have come to resilience that's phenomenal. And I mean, this book really sheds a lot of light on it. So I'm going to start with one thing. Gina, I just wanted to say thank God for Jessica Simpson and Billy Bob.
Yeah, Joe Bob.
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for that, I mean, and if you're watching this podcast and you haven't got your copy of the book yet, go get it, even on audiobook, so you can be semi-illiterate and you can still get the content of the book. Phenomenal. I mean, again, it just shows how God works in amazing ways, in ways that we'd never ever understand or believe. And it's amazing where it's come from and what you guys have brought through. So I want to do each of you do your own little introduction, and I'm just going to start with Paul to start with, because he's the only member of the RAVEN23 team that that I've had a personal connection to. We had conversations not that long ago, I guess a couple of years ago, 2023. And we talked about tattoo work, and we talked about philosophy, and we talked about, unbeknownst to me, spiritual components that I was definitely pushing away from. But he was very instrumental in what I'll call my comeback to my relationship with our Heavenly Dad. So, Paul, tell me a little bit about you, a little bit about where you came from and how you got into this process.
Yeah, so our seed of where you and I connected was when Evan had gone to Canada and gotten some really incredible ink work done. And I knew that that you were in that space and that you were in the BW community. And so my thought was, well, I'm going to go to and get some of that custom work done too. And so that was really kind of the basis for us to get to know one another, and the friendship really just kind of spawned from there.
Yeah, we talked a lot of philosophy, Paul.
Yeah. So it kind of bled into just life and stuff, and you knew our story, you knew our background, and I think there was a point of connection with the philosopher Nietzsche, who's one of my favorites, and we kind of just started pulling that thread, and developed a relationship and just friendship over that, and then it just spawned into where we are now.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me about your background. How did you? And we don't have to get too detailed because, like I said, there's lots of other podcasts you've done that with. But tell me how you started into RAVEN23 and then kind of where it went from there.
Yeah, so I was working on the ambassador's detail. When I first came in the country, they put me in Kirkuk up at the embassy there. And then DonCorps came in and took over that contract. They moved everybody down south, and we got plugged into the advanced team for Ambassador Khalilzad. And it was after January 23rd, that infamous day where we lost some good men. One of my good friends was Shane Stanfield, who was a gunner.
Yep.
And I just said to myself, I'm not going to have that feeling again. I felt like I was getting somewhat complacent in the position I was in, and so made the decision to try to transfer over to TST. Talked with what was Ian? Ian was the ship leader at the time, and kind of interviewed with him, met some of the guys, and then I was brought over to be on the team.
Right. Nick, what's your take? How did you call this? How did you get into RAVEN23? How did that start?
I was blessed with by the time I got into Blackwater, I got there late 2006.
Right.
And so they had streamlined the process where they had a lot of great instructors, and they had tier 1 guys teaching us stuff. So for whatever reason, one of the instructors loved me, and he took me under his wing, and I guess they take a lot of notes on you or whatever. But I got there, and they just told me, based on your background, we're going to put you on red detail straight off. Okay. And I had no clue what red detail was, obviously. And then I got assigned to 2-3. And like Paul was January 23rd, that was shortly after I got to the team. I was a machine gunner that day. And people that don't, like you said, we lost that day, and we fought for 3.5 hours to get their bodies back. It's worse than
a little bit of technical communication there, Nick, but I think we've got you. Dustin, tell me a couple things. Let's start with one question. When you first met Gina, what was your perspective? Like, what did you think she was going to do? Did you think she was all that in a handshake, or what? Like, what was your first impression of her when you first met her?
Well, so we had spoke a lot over the phone and email for a long time before she actually got to come see me, because they wasn't trying to let this happen. Okay. So it was definitely a fight for her to be able to come and see me, and for me to even call her because I ended up going to the special housing unit for a minute, and whenever I was there, she was trying to get in touch with me to get the process started, and basically they told me to put her on my phone list. I did. Then they told me that if I contact her in any situation, shape, form, or fashion, that I would go back to the SHU and for contacting her. Well, it took a while to get all that straightened out, and it was great to meet her in person. And it was this has been a long road, and without the help, it's this battle. So many people's helped us out, but Gina just keep going and driving, really means a lot to us.
Did you have any idea that it was going to get to where you are today with the book and the incredible impact that it's having?
This is a humbling experience. No, I had no idea where we'd be sitting today, and I'm just damn proud to be here.
How did you end up in RAVEN23? How did that start?
So I'd been in country a year and a half, something like that, and I was mainly out of Baghdad. I went down the hill in the Najaf area for a while, and then I ended up coming back up to Baghdad, and they were starting RAVEN23, and so I got asked if I wanted to go over there, and I said absolutely. And so I was there from the time that we formed the team up through the incident itself and everything.
Oh, wow, so you're like on ground zero with RAVEN23.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Evan, how about you? How did you get in with this group?
I think I got to Iraq a little bit after Dustin, and I got there in the beginning of 2005. And they put me on a regular protection team. I think we had a single principal that we were dedicated to, unlike other teams that kind of switch from one person to the next, depending on the mission. And pretty much as soon as I got there, the team leader told me that the team had been tasked to go to the middle of the desert to guard like a mass grave site, or guard the scientists that were going to dig up the mass grave site for the Saddam Hussein trial. So
Right.
I wasn't too thrilled about that, but that's where they sent me, and I kind of felt like we're in a vulnerable position being out in the desert and not having like any type of military support out there. So we did that for about a month. We came back to Baghdad for a while, and the tempo of the team was like, all day working. I saw everybody else in our camp doing little short missions for a couple hours a day, but our team was working like 8-10 hour days, sometimes 12-hour days. So I was kind of getting tired of it. So I did one contract like that. And then my following contract, when I came back, I requested to get put on red detail, and they sent me over to RAVEN23. I think that was in 2006 sometime.
Oh, so y'all connected that way. Did you have prior connections before RAVEN23, or was that when you all got together? I mean, you knew of each other probably, eh?
I think we saw each other around. I definitely would see Dustin around because I think we were there a little bit before Paul and Nick. But it's such a small community; you kind of know everybody.
Yeah.
And then when we got put on the team together, then you become like brothers,
Yeah, for sure. That's a question that a lot of people have. I'm just thinking about that as you spoke. That brotherhood that you just mentioned. Is there any other experience that you've had in your life that has brought you that connection as strongly as this?
I would say no. Something I guess you could compare being in prison and that difficult situation where you kind of do create bonds with people because you're going through a hard situation. But there's something about like military service and the guys that you're with in combat where you could know somebody for a couple months And the relationship you have with them is stronger than somebody you grew up with for 20 years. You know, it's like fast forward your friendship or your bond with a person, and it's like incredible.
Do you find that another question I'll ask? Do you find that the bonds that you've made in your military service with other guys is close as well, or does that filter out over time?
Uh, you do have a strong bond with guys you might have served with in the United States, but there's something about being in that dangerous situation, and you're kind of like you have each other's backs, and you have like crazy ups and crazy downs. You always have that bond, and you could not talk for a couple years, and then you see the person, and it's like uh, you didn't miss a step.
Yeah, that's awesome. Nick, when you were when you arrived into RAVEN23, did you have a sense of that pre-entry? Like, did you kind of jump in and see these guys were pretty tight and connected?
I was immediately welcomed by the guys that had been there for a long time. And so as soon as we went to the range, we started having fun. It seemed like the day I got there, we were out at the range shooting, and then it was the next day was starting work. And I got put with a great group of leaders right off the bat. So, yeah, I fell right in, and they figured out pretty quick that they wanted me up in the machine gun. And, you know, I would always pray before we would go out into the red zone. Anybody that's ever been to Baghdad knows that when you leave the green zone and you go into the red, there's a bunch of speed bumps on the way out. And so that's like a jarring reminder that I needed to be talking to God. So I just want to say, God is good. If you put your faith in Jesus, anything is possible. You know, I'd like to just let everybody know that. And, he delivered us through a lot of hardship. And there's a lot of situations that we should not have come home, but he brought us home.
Amen. That's what I'll say to that. I hear you. Somebody told me that it was Paul was the cutest of all of you guys. I don't know. I mean, there was some reference to some character in some TV show that Gina
Evan's the one that looks like he walks out of GQ.
No, but my beard is nothing compared to what Paul has. Look at that.
I
thing.
know, right?
That's right. No, it was the names. It was your nicknames, because I wrote about that in the book.
Oh, okay.
Otis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that y'all are all equally beautiful. I just want to get that on record.
That's cool. Gina, what were the nicknames that you got? What did you have a sense of for those nicknames? What initially? What did you think?
Yeah, that was it was really interesting because that was in the court papers. You know, the prosecution was trying to make a real big deal about that,
Right.
Because Dustin's nickname was Extreme, and then Stewie was Nick. I think Libo, right? Is Liberty, Evan, and then Paul was Otis. And you know, the only one that I really kind of wondered about was the Extreme one. It was because just, you know, they were using it to try to make him look really bad.
Right.
And so, I mean, that was one of the reasons I wanted to meet him, was because I just wanted to see, you know, why were they calling this guy Extreme? Is he like some crazy man or something? But it was not that. It was just because he was, like I said in the book, extremely prepared so that he wouldn't get killed, sticking up out of, a turret in the most dangerous city in the world during the most dangerous time of the Iraq War. Right. Which makes total sense. He's brilliant because of that. What idiot would, not want to have all that? But it was just it was an example of what the prosecution did. They tried every possible thing that they could to make these guys look terrible and try them in the press so that, this Washington, D.C. jury, which already was very upset about the idea of contracting, would put them in prison. So it was just one of many tools that the prosecutors used that were illegal to get to their end, which was illegally putting them in prison.
You brought that point up, so I'm going to go to another question that I had. In retrospect, and maybe each of you can kind of give me just a little blurb on how you feel about it. In retrospect, you can see that the defense had their direction, had their plan Maybe it lacked a lot, maybe it was there. But initially, when the court cases started, what was your sense of your defense attorneys? Like, did you feel like that they were working in your side, or did you really, as Gina put in the book, did you just really think that maybe they just didn't know what they bit off to take care of? I mean, this became so much more than what it really should have been, and all basically because of the manipulation. But what's your take on the defense, Nick? Like, when you first got in there, how did you feel about your defense attorneys?
Well, I think it's hard for anyone who hasn't had someone actually shooting at them or had to pick up pieces of someone that has been blown up to even relate at all to our situation. So, I think that was the main disconnect between us and our legal teams. They had no idea what it was like to be in combat, just like we had no idea what it was like to go to trial. So I kind of felt sorry for them. I felt like that, especially because the government was allowed to get away with so much misconduct, as Gina talks about, it would have been a lot different if all the evidence would have been presented. But that's the problem with the jury system. There's all these rules of evidence, and most of those rules of evidence are stacked against the defendant. And most people don't realize that. Most people think that the government, is always honest and they put forth their best effort or whatever. But Gina did a really good job of breaking down the legality of how they were able to hide exculpatory evidence. They were able to delete drone footage of the actual incident itself. I believe that if the drone footage would have been available to the public, I don't think we would even step foot in a courtroom.
Yeah, no kidding. What's your take on that, Evan, as well? Same sort of thing?
Truthfully, I was really happy with the lawyer that I got. I was just fortunate to get linked up with the way it worked out was in the very, very beginning, they had a single lawyer for all of us.
Right.
It was the four of us and another individual on the team, Donald Ball, who passed away here a couple years ago, and Jeremy Ridgway. So there was six of us with one lawyer, and then once he talked to me first. So once he talked to me, he kind of figured out that the case was so complex that each one of us needed a lawyer. And I was just fortunate that I got linked up with him, and I was super happy with him. I still talk to him. I think he's a great guy. He would even come to see me in prison, even when there was no news about the case. He'd just come to check up on me, surprise visits. And he really took care of me. But I just feel like we could have had, the O.J. Simpson dream team, and the deck was stacked against us, and we would have lost. There was nothing they really could have done, I don't think, that would have got us not guilty. But that being said, sometimes, when you're put in a situation like after we were convicted, you have nothing to do but to sit there and Monday morning quarterback about, oh, they should have done this, they should have done that. Whether any of that would have worked, I don't think so, looking back now.
Yeah,
I want to interject here because I interviewed all of them.
Right.
And every single one of them was astonished. They were shocked at the way that this trial unfolded, not just because of the prosecutorial misconduct, but because the judge allowed it.
Right.
Not one of the lawyers that was involved in this case went away from this case looking at the law the way that they did when they came in. Dane Butswinkus, who represented Nick and his firm, which is Williams and Connolly, they did it for free. They did 2 trials for free.
Yeah.
I mean, they put, how many lawyers were on it, Nick? Like 4?
Well,
and
Dane had 200 lawyers underneath him. So
right.
On the actual trial team, there was 5 that actually presented evidence, but they had hundreds of lawyers at their disposal where it was like millions of dollars. And I think that's the main point. I don't mean to cut you off, Gina, but
No.
that's the main point. Evan hit on it. I had tens of millions of dollars worth of legal representation from one of the tippy top law firms in Washington, D.C., and they still couldn't make traction with this judge, and they still couldn't have a fair trial. So,
Yeah.
So to throw something in here on that point too, when we were in the middle of trial, like my attorney was getting up and he would go to address the court, and the judge would tell him just sit down, like overruled, sit down. And it got to the point that I was like, why can't my attorney even get up and speak without getting before he even, like, whenever he objects, sit down, overruled, sit down, and he tries to speak. I mean, people don't realize how much that you can have the best attorneys in the world, but when you got a judge that will do whatever he wants to do and not let things in that shouldn't be, just all kinds of stuff, the deck gets stacked against you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
No, and the press wasn't doing their job, you know. And that's the purpose of the media is when that kind of stuff happens, which it will, is to stand up and say, hey, you're not following the rules. And they didn't do it. They basically just took whatever the government said and reprinted it. And it was just shocking to me. I couldn't believe it, because it wasn't a question of, well, you know, interpretation of the law. They were just flat out flouting the law. And the press was, the Washington, D.C. press corps was just sitting there repeating the narrative that the State Department and the DOJ wanted them to report. And that's why the case ended up in D.C. anyway, was because, you know, they could control the judge, they could control the jury, they could control the press. And so it looked like, you know, oh, look, Iraqis were giving you American justice. It was just a completely false narrative built on the backs of 4 normal people who did their job correctly and properly.
And then the judge threw a statement in there and said, if I believe the law the way it's written, the case would be over now. And he just kept pushing it.
There were 3 things that jumped out to me, Bear, and one is it came out in hindsight. And the hindsight piece is that our attorneys, in my view, set up a great legal strategy in legal context. I don't think what they were prepared for was this was a political battle from day one. This was not a legal case at all. The legal case was simply kind of a front to present that, hey, we're giving these guys their representation. And what causes me to say that is the judge's opening statements during the first house cleaning motion was that the Iraqi people deserve justice.
We've waited long enough for justice.
And so he underscored that essentially these 4 guys are going to have to come up and pay penance for the mistakes of our foreign policy. And what underscored that was when the judge fell asleep multiple times during our trial and had to be woken up by our defense team, the prosecutors, and the marshals. And I'll finish with this. The third piece was that same house cleaning, it was before voir dire, so it would have been in June. I was there. The other 3 guys were traveling. I was in a suit, and Patrick Martin, who was the assistant USA attorney, walked up and said, hey, who is this fine-looking young man?
He didn't even know who he was prosecuting. It was just they were just faceless people who could just be disposed of.
And that attorney, by the way, was removed from the case later on during one of Nick's trials because he had shown to have perjured himself.
Yeah.
From a civilian's perspective, and I guess maybe a lot of my friends will call me a civilian, so maybe I'll rephrase that. From looking from the outside, and I mean, you know, my connection to Blackwater, as you know, and I got this deep, heartfelt connection to that organization, and I can say that the training that I got there saved my life a number of times. So I had a special place, and all of us as any kind of contractor that was working anywhere in non-permissive over that time period from basically 2003 onward, knew about Eric Prince, knew about Blackwater, knew about what it was about, and had a real strong love for anybody else that's in any other company. I mean, I had friends that were civilians sitting in my tattoo chair while I'm watching this stuff on my phone and saying, how is that possible? Why are these guys in trouble for what they've done? And it was, like I said, I mean, even from a civilian's perspective, it was so obvious that the judicial system was manipulated never mind corrupt, just at least manipulated right from the get-go. And like you said, Paul, when a judge in the case who's supposed to be impartial literally states that the Iraqi people need justice, you're right. I mean, he wanted somebody to pay that penance, and it was obviously going to be you guys. And here's a question, digging right in, Gina. In all your research that you did, where do you think that came all the way from the top? Do you think that I mean, here we can call this a conspiracy?
Yes, I think there's no question. I mean, they had to spend tens of millions of dollars to do this. I covered the Los Angeles U.S. Attorney's Office for a long time, more than a decade. And I know for a fact that every time a U.S. attorney comes in, they get their marching orders from D.C. It's not like they just make it up and think, oh, this is a great idea. Of course it's coming from the top. And it was Eric Holder and Hillary Clinton, I feel very sure that they were quite aware, because Joe Biden went over to Iraq shortly after the case was dismissed by a judge, Judge Urbina, who was a great judge,
right,
and a Clinton appointee. They all got together and said, nope, we can't let this one die. We got to bring it back. So they did everything that they could, put their thumb on the scale, broke the law every way that they possibly could to bring this case back to trial. It is absolutely no question in my mind that everybody at the top of the Obama administration knew exactly what was going on. But this somehow seemed like a winning foreign policy, mainly because Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton ran on the fact that they wanted to get rid of contractors. But once they get in, they realize you cannot have the country be stable without them.
Right.
And then starts this drone war, and they're killing all these civilians. So, people over in the Middle East are furious, obviously, rightly so. So somebody has to pay the price. They're like, look over here, we're going to try these guys and put them in prison, but don't worry that we're killing all these civilians with the drones. And we do, make good on our campaign promise to get rid of the contractors. So it was just so misguided. And that's a very soft term that I would use. It's just,
misguided.
I have many other expletives that I could use about it, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about what I say in this podcast, but you guys too down there. But misguided is definitely an understatement. I mean, it didn't take us long up here outside of the United States and outside of the circle that you guys were in to start realizing just how corrupt it was. But it wasn't anything unfamiliar. I mean, I've seen numerous local law cases that are the same. It's like the system is broken. It's like they've got this opportunity to manipulate the environment based on a political agenda, and it was definitely apparent that there was a huge political agenda. I think that to think that really this was because they tried to save face with Iraq, which was a completely, excuse my language, clusterfuck country, based on all of the interference through many years and through the manipulation that had occurred. And the crazy part, and I mean, we're seeing this more and more as we I guess venture through the Trump years, as we go through his position as now the president. It's apparent that we've got this category of media over here that's going to manipulate everything, do what they're told, spew the agenda that's the government agenda, and continue to propagate that no matter what the reality of the situation is. And it was apparent that was really happening with your case, all you guys. I'm amazed how you were all able to endure and sustain some semblance of sanity throughout that.
I think that was probably the biggest shock to your system, was that the media wasn't covering it in that manner.
Yeah, that was the hardest thing, because I come from a generation of reporters that, we hated everybody, we didn't think that anybody was great. Somebody broke the law. It was like, woo, this is a party. We get to report on whoever it was. There were no heroes. That's our job, is to stay apart from the people that we're covering. So I thought, oh, this will be great. I've got this trial transcript and I can show 3 or 4 different Brady violations. And I mean, and that didn't even scratch the surface of this. So at the time I wasn't working at an outlet. I just finished writing a book and I was doing something else, but I had a lot of friends in the national media. So, because I worked in LA for 17 years at a major outlet. And so, I would take it to my friends and say, hey, look at this. Can you believe it? Mm-hmm. And they just, the reaction was either, oh, it's Blackwater. And I'm like, so? Or it was, yeah, well, nobody wants to talk about the Iraq War anymore. And I'm like, this is not the Iraq War. This is our justice system. Are you worried that this could happen to you? And I just could not get anyone interested in it, which was very upsetting. That told me that we have gone to a whole new place in the American media.
Yeah, and it's not just the American media. And isn't it something like 5 large corporations own pretty much the majority of all media outlets on the planet?
Yes, and that's the reason that it is that way, because there are a lot of competing interests with those mega corporations, and they're very worried about pissing somebody off. So it's this very entangled web of loyalties that have nothing to do with reporting the news. And that, I think that you hit on exactly what the problem is.
Yeah, that was pretty apparent through the process. I'm sure it was apparent for you guys too. Dustin, when you're saying like your attorney couldn't even speak, that this fall asleep judge was stopping him from bringing facts to the table. It's profound. Was any of that available to the public during that time, or did any other media outlet talk about anything in the case in that regard?
So we had reporters and people in their reporting all the time, and it was crazy to watch the narrative go from being balanced to it didn't matter what anything was said. We were guilty before we were even started in trial. And one thing that we touched on earlier that I just want to circle back to was, we were talking about drones a while ago. They had the drone footage. They used still frames during our trial. And if the drone footage would have showed us going and doing what they claimed to do, they would have had that dude playing on loop during the trial, and they would have sank us that way.
Right.
But it's hard to have faith in the justice system that did us this way, because, you look at how we were done compared to, let's say that there's a sex offender right down the road here that gets picked up. Well, if they violate his rights, the case is over.
Right.
And they kept pushing and kept pushing. So I don't know, this whole system that we have right now, when it can be weaponized and used like this against us. Like I've said before, if we don't say something about it, who will? And if we don't give this a voice, then it's just going to keep happening.
And to kind of put a fine point on that media piece, Bear, Kristen made an observation multiple times, and she'd come in and witness part of the trials, but she noticed that the AP reporter would always leave after the government made their case. They would never stick around for the defense. And so you can't report on what you don't know, but you can report on what you do know. And so that was the thrust of the entire argument. Well, I wasn't there for that.
Yeah, but you're not allowed to do that. That's the thing. If I ever came back and showed
that,
I know. And that's the things that I noticed when I was, initially when Joe Bob was trying to get me to do this thing, and I kept saying, forget it. He was giving me, he would forward me email or news stories. And I did, and I noticed that. I was like, this is very interesting, because I understand exactly what it looks like when the government's leaking to you and what your story is going to look like. Even though they don't quote the government, it's slanted a certain way. You can kind of track the information back to where it came, and it clearly had to come from the government, right? Because
right.
the defense know that. So I didn't know this because I had talked to no one at this point, but I was like, it seemed like there was a gag order in this case, because there's nothing from the defense, but the prosecutors are clearly leaking, and the judge is clearly letting them leak.
Right.
So that was the problem, was that I was like, okay, how is this possible? Because usually federal judges, if they're in any way fair, are going to penalize whoever's leaking. You're going to get sanctioned, you're going to get fined, or something like this. I saw nothing of that. So I'm like, okay, this clearly looks like it's like a government show trial in a way. Like I wasn't ready to kind of go there at that point. But when I looked at the media, that was one of the first things that piqued my interest and made me want to, look into it further, because I was like, this is not fair. Because if it was me doing this, and I did plenty of cases just like this, I was like, at least in every story there would have been like, the defense had no comment, or the defense said this or whatever. And there was nothing like that in there. So I knew that they had done it. And I'm like, how are the editors letting them do this? Because I would have gotten fried if I came back and wrote a story that was only the prosecution. I mean, that's insane.
You, on another direction here, there was 3 trials, correct?
Yeah.
So, guys, maybe just give me your point, Nick. Between the first and the second trial, where was your headspace about what was going on within the judicial system at that time?
I think they really covered in depth that the judicial system is not going to work, and my only hope was in Jesus. And so every day was the same day. I just got up and I focused on the Lord. I did my workout, studied my case, and tried to help somebody else there in the prison. And so when we won our appeal, my conviction was vacated completely.
Yes.
And then, so that meant I thought I was going home. And then they're like, no, they're going to retry you. Even though the judges said Mr. Slatten probably did not do this. I don't know what court that is not reasonable doubt, but for whatever reason, the appeals court basically punted the football on my situation and my brother's situation, and they basically just gave the prosecutors another bite at the apple. And but it's a good thing that they did in retrospect, because we found out a lot of information that we would have never known. That's when all the classified stuff came out, that the lead Iraqi investigator was a terrorist. And so I think the big headline of this is our FBI worked with terrorists to prosecute veterans. So, I mean, if you don't think that there's something wrong with that, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. If you just heard that statement and that doesn't bother you, there is something.
No kidding. And I don't think that statement hit any newspaper, any television network, any radio station, anywhere. And you just made it real plain and simple. If the FBI is willing to work with a terrorist to prosecute veterans, members of the United States, people who live in the United States, civilians, whatever, doesn't matter. I mean, that's just out of control. But then again, local, generally politically in our current time, we're witnessing that. We're seeing that happening right now.
Even the forensics FBI analyst who was being cross-examined by our attorneys was asked a direct question of how many rounds or round shavings were found in any civilian body, civilian vehicle, or the scene itself that matched any of our 4 weapon systems. And he said not a single one.
No. In fact, the only bullet fragment they found in a live person was an AK-47 round.
Right. But I guess nobody was shooting AK-47s apparently on that day, right?
That was the story.
It was a magical bullet, right?
Right. Where did that come from? Fallujah somewhere? Or how did that get there?
Well, hey, one of the victims on their list apparently was over at the airport. How far away was that?
2 miles.
2 miles away. They shot someone who was at the airport.
So
that's another thing. They had initially they reportedly shot 8 to 12, which is what they reported in their statements. But I mean, where do these other 20 victims come from?
Yeah. What did the total number get to? Was it 27 or 31 or something?
34, wasn't it? Well, this is the beauty. It changed between the first indictment and the second indictment.
Well, it changed mid-trial as well, so the counts changed.
Right.
Oh, so right in the middle of the trial.
Right.
I didn't know it. Wow, I didn't know that. But yes, so some of the people who were included in the victim list included the person who was at the airport. When I examined some of the death certificates, which I didn't get, the government had them, or no, it was Nick's lawyers had them, and turned them over to the government. Some of them, there were no death certificates. There was a couple people who did not die on the same day as the Nister Square incident. So, I mean, it was totally insane. And not only that, you know, the press did not report that that the guy who was in charge, this man who was allegedly a terrorist, the guy who was in charge of the investigation, was running ads on Iraqi TV, like a mesothelioma ad saying, if you got shot in a Nister Square, come here and we'll give you $10,000. That wasn't included anywhere for the jury to know. I don't think, right? Did they tell anybody?
I don't recall.
Yeah.
Wow. That's kind of interesting advertisement there. If you've been shot anywhere at any point in time in Iraq, give us a call. We'll get you on the Blackwater RAVEN23 law case.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I talked to the charge d'affaires in Baghdad about that, and he goes, "Yeah, that's what we were doing. We were paying people $10,000 for a dead family member, $5,000 for injury, and $2,500 for property damage."
Was that pay coming from any of the pallets of American currency that was shipped over there, or where did that come from?
Yeah. So now you know what those monies were used for.
I thought it was hospitals and school.
Yeah. No.
I thought it was for all the water
veterans in prison.
I think a big point on that body count is initially it was 17 dead, and immediately they realized that 3 of the 17, they were mid-level players. Like every intelligence agency knew that these guys were terrorists, so they kind of just took them off the list conveniently.
Yeah, it's an extreme level of manipulation, that's for sure. You know, we've kind of gone back to you saying that, and I'm going to point this at you, Nick, that you spent a lot of time and a lot of connection to your faith, and I think that's really amazing. I don't know about other people when they watch this podcast, but I feel like you guys are an example of that ability to stay strong to what your own personal convictions are. And I'm not even going to put a religious side to it or a God side to it. I'm just going to say that for individuals who've gone through what you've gone through, to remain as strong as you did remain in your personal faith is exemplary. I mean, I don't think that there's a lot of people that can, go through what you guys have gone through and maintain that. So tell me, Evan, let's just start with you. What did you do while you're incarcerated, waiting for another trial? What did you do to maintain your sanity? What worked for you?
Oh, wow. The most effective thing to manage my stress in prison was my workouts. That was something that I could do whether I was in the cell by myself, whether I had access to the yard, whether we were on lockdown or not. I could always work out. Shower wasn't always guaranteed. Certain food wasn't always guaranteed. Phone calls wasn't always guaranteed. But you could always work out. There's always a way to exercise. And the way my mind works, even in normal life, if I don't exercise, I feel anxious. I stress out about things. Maybe I have anxiety about certain things. But the crazy thing is, the harder the workout I would do in prison, the more effective it would be. So I would destroy myself doing burpees or doing certain things in the yard, and that really helped me. I don't think I would have made it if I wasn't able to have the discipline to do that. I prided myself in working out every single day, and I had log books. I even have some of the log books at home where I would map out every single thing I would do every day, like as far as the workout, when I was eating. And that was something that I had control over. And that was probably the biggest thing for me.
I read something in the book that kind of tickled my fancy, and I thought we could bring it up in case there's somebody from prison watching this. So you cooked eggs on your stainless steel counter?
Well, yeah. There's a lot of ways you can figure out how to cook. If you want to get something done in prison, you have nothing but time to figure out how to get that done. And so for me, the main thing was like, man, I really want some scrambled eggs. How am I going to get some scrambled eggs? So they used to have certain, I think they were almost like wooden tables in the cells or desks, and they got rid of those, and they thought they were doing something good by putting in flat stainless steel desks. What they didn't plan on was that guys were going to steal heating elements and put them on the bottom of the tables so you could have like a hibachi grill in there. And truthfully, I don't know about the other guys probably had a different experience because the prison that you're in is not only the security level that whether what I want to say is like the location of the prison determines who's going to be working there, who the staff is. So,
Okay.
for example, Dustin was in Memphis. So imagine the officers that would live in that area. They might have certain political views or they might have certain upbringings.
Right.
Now imagine where I was in like central Pennsylvania. So there's a lot more Trump supporters, a lot more military and guys like that working at the prison. So I had to walk a line between, being an inmate and these guys wanting to be my friends because they all knew me. They all talked about me. They all wanted to shake my hand. A couple of them shook my hand, which is you're not supposed to do that at all to an inmate.
Right.
They could get in big trouble, and me too. And on top of that, if the inmates see you and you're really buddy with the COs, you're gonna get in trouble with them. So I had to walk a fine line between, being a convict, quote unquote, like all these guys want to try to be, and then trying to be cool with the officers because they would allow me to get away with stuff. So if they would walk by my cell and they'd see, me cooking a sandwich or something, like cooking a quesadilla, they wouldn't get mad, So I kind of had a pass, truthfully. I had a pass with a lot of things. But the one thing that really did affect me was the warden that was put in charge at a certain point when I was there. He had it out for me because he saw me working out in the winter with like a t-shirt on. He saw me doing all these crazy workouts. He thought I was planning to get out. He's planning an escape. So he would come and shake down my cell personally. The warden would.
Wow.
And that's like unheard of.
Wow.
Wow. Did you ever? Has he ever been in contact with you since then?
No. But when I was leaving, the day that they walked me out the front of the door, I think he was on duty, and they were all scrambling because when a president gives you a pardon, all these dudes are scrambling to get that through. That's coming from the top. So
Yep.
I was kind of in the position of like, oh, fuck this place, I'm out of here. So when they were walking me out, they're like, hey, his name is Finley. They're like, Finley's on duty. You got anything to say? I'm like, tell him I'm out of this motherfucker. And I just walked out.
So he's not on your Christmas card list or anything like that?
No, I didn't have to escape. They let me out for free.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Nick, what was just now that we're on that track, let's go down that track. Tell me what your personal experience was in the prison that you were in, and how does that compare to what the other guys experienced? Did you have any opportunity, number one, to have any conversations with the other guys at any point in time other than during trial maybe, or were you completely isolated? And then tell me about the institute that you were in.
So I got bounced around a lot.
Yeah.
Having to go how long were we down before the decision came back on our appeal? Like almost 3 years.
I think it was, so we got convicted October 22nd of 2014, and I think we had our oral arguments January 13th of 2017.
Yeah.
That was the 19th, but anyway.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So basically 3 years.
So it was 3 years where I was in the United States Penitentiary down there in Florida.
Right.
And it was kind of the same deal that Evan was talking about. A lot of military guys down there in that part of Florida. And I actually had them, say they believed that I was innocent and stuff. And so it was an odd experience for guys to keep you locked up and yet know that you shouldn't be there. So that was odd. But when we won our appeal, I no longer had a conviction, so I couldn't be in prison anymore. So I had to go back to jail. And anybody that's ever been to jail and prison will tell you that prison is a lot better as far as freedom of movement, because jail is just like you're stuck, I remember when I first got to prison, I was like, oh, you can see the sky, it's a really big deal to be able to go to the yard and run, and not have to worry about that kind of thing. But they offered me 10 years when I won my appeal. God blessed me and we won our appeal. I got a whole new trial. So they offered me 10 years off the rip, and I turned it down. And I was in a pretty comfortable place. I just got commissary, and that's a really big deal in jail because you starve in jail. Prison feeds a little bit better than jail.
Yeah.
And so just to have some extra food is a really big deal. But as soon as I got my commissary bag, they're like, pack your stuff, you're leaving. It was the very next day after I turned that plea deal down. And by midnight that night, they had shackled me, and they had sprayed me with a whole can of mace, and they had had me lay down on the floor and kicked me. And I remember telling one of them that Jesus loved them, and he just stopped. He's this big old dude. He just stopped, and he you see this single tear come down his face, and he goes to the water cooler and he gets me a cup of water. And so that was a really awesome moment, in the midst of suffering. I saw that God planted a seed in his heart, and then so I go back to trial, and they're just bouncing you from place to place. The federal system actually has a term for it. They call it diesel therapy, because you're breathing in all the diesel fumes. And so anytime you get comfortable and established at a certain jail, they'll just pick you up and move you. It's like they're just watching to see if you're comfortable, and then they'll move you. Eventually, I stayed in Rappahannock Regional Jail for a long time. They transported me to trial for the second trial. That trial hung, and the third trial, they offered me time served, and I turned that down as well. And so this time, instead of having me sprayed and kicked and beaten by the guards, they actually just put me in solitary confinement for the remainder of the time. So they were trying to break me physically at first. That didn't work. And then they were trying to break me mentally, and obviously that didn't work. I was blessed. I got to call on the name of the Lord, and had some guys across. It was crazy. It's such a small world. When I first got locked up, I saw the same guys that were still in DC jail. So it was they're like, oh, there's Nick. He's back, So it was just really cool in the situation I got put in DC jail. And I could see God's hand in it all, even though I had to suffer, and even though we all had to suffer. It was, in my opinion, it was for my good.
That's remarkable. You could have the most religious guy tell a story about faith and dedication and connection with God, and it wouldn't be a story that mirrors the magnitude of yours, Nick. Your faith and holding on to that faith is remarkable. It's something that I think a lot of people would really want to aspire to. And I mean, I don't know if people really realize, but solitary is a fun place to be. How long did they keep you in solitary?
How long was my last trial, Gina? Do you remember?
It was a month, wasn't it?
So how long did
a month of the trial, and then another several weeks of I can't remember what the deliberations for the last one were.
They kept me 4 months after trial, so after the deliberation. So I think I was about 6 months in solitary there. And anybody that's ever been to DC jail, they know that solitary is no place you want to be. Like, I had a guy get stabbed right outside my cell, and it's just a bad way to live. But like I said, it really got me centered on the Lord, and it really, when I got found guilty the third trial, I was just wrecked. I was mad at God. I was like, what are you doing? How could you let this happen, kind of thing. And they're taking me back to my cell, and I asked the guard, I was like, hey, I've just been convicted of first-degree murder. That means I'm going to get a life sentence. Do you care if I call someone? And he's like, sure, man. And he put me in the rec yard. He's like, take as much time as you need. And so I'm despairing in my heart, right? And I'm praying to God. And as I'm walking to the phone and I reach out my hand to grab the phone, scripture comes to mind that says, whoever puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom of heaven.
Wow.
And so God was letting me know at that moment that there were more people that I needed to speak to while I was incarcerated, because you think about the unique opportunity to tell somebody about Jesus. The first guy that I was friends with in federal prison, he had been locked up since he was 19 years old. He was 46 when I met him. So the odds of me and him ever landing at the same spot, astronomical odds, right? God arranged that meeting, and I feel like he arranged a lot of meetings after I was convicted for the second time, because, yeah, of course I wanted to go home, but I understood immediately when he told me that you've got more work to do if you'll just be obedient and you'll submit to me. And that's what I did. That's how you do a life sentence. You focus on other people. Of course you study your own case. Of course you take care, like Evan was talking about, working out is a big deal for your mental health, for your physical health. But for me, reading the Word of God and helping people with that aspect of their journey was the most important thing about prison, because I saw a lot of guys' heart, and I saw a lot of their minds change when they asked Jesus to save them. So,
Amen. Beautiful testament, Nick. It's, I'm sure that I really do think that Gina, the book that you've created, and memories that are going to be available for people to actually put in their minds, I think that all that you guys have been through, it really plays a very strong part in people's psyche. I think that like I said, you're all living examples of intestinal fortitude and drive and passion and compassion at the same time. I mean, for you to say that, Nick, and have that guy drop a tear, that's a big deal. You touched the soul.
Yeah, apart from Jesus, I can do nothing. That's what I've got to remind myself every day. I've just got to push pause and be like, thank you, Jesus, for saving me. I can't be kind. I can't be good. I am none of those things. I need you to come in and help me with all those issues that I have. So, I just encourage anybody to put their trust in him, and he'll lead them in the way that they should go.
What, did you have access, Nick, to a Bible when you were in prison and writing material, and as well? Have you written down any of this stuff that's going to be the next book?
I've actually been approached about it a few times, and I've wrote down tons of stuff, so it's there. But right now we're just focused on this awesome book Gina's put out. So it's been pretty hectic since the book dropped. Everybody's been super excited, and I don't like the spotlight either, so it's kind of anxious as well. So,
well, I've heard Paul likes the spotlight. I think it's because of that. He's all involved in politics, and I mean I'm going to just take this in a different direction, and then Dustin, I got a couple questions for you. All you guys have endured this absolutely catastrophic situation in government, in the legal system, in the judicial system, and here you are, Paul, directly involved in politics. I mean, how does that feel?
Yeah, so my introduction back into society was with my pen pal, professionally speaking, Senator Drew Springer. He's with the Texas House, and matter of fact, it was Dustin's aunt, if I recall correctly, Letha, that made that first connection when he was a House member.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, that's right. Because he only did one term as senator.
And so, as a House member, he then drafted a letter. Essentially, he had his staff and his general counsel go through and really kind of go through the case. And he and I think it was 18 other House members at the time signed on to a letter exposing essentially what had happened, the judicial just nightmare that we'd experienced, and set it back in the judge's lap. And the judge read it during our second sentencing or resentencing, and clearly was not happy about that. I wanted to refute that publicly, but essentially, I mean, the deed was done, right? There's no unmixing Kool-Aid, as Judge Urbina said when he first tossed our case out. So I digress from that. Coming back into society, Drew was a pen pal and has really become a family friend, and he offered me a job, a position in his office for district work. And so that was really my reintroduction back into things. And I think his mindset, along with mine, is if you want to change things, you have to get involved and you have to do it from the inside. It's really easy, and I've been guilty of this many times in my life, to throw rocks, but to not really do anything, just kind of be a firecracker in a rainstorm. But at the end of the day, that's not going to exact change. And so by extension, what this project has helped me understand is you have a conservative on one side and a liberal on the other, both with their own, both with their own mindsets of how things, that normative argument, how things should be. But at the end of the day, I think Gina and I share a lot of the same goals.
Right.
It's just a different approach.
Yeah, and I'm the editor of the newspaper here in Olney. So I'm in Drew Springer's district, or when he was still in the Senate. But so we actually worked together on some things when he was working for Drew. So so it's been great to have him be involved in politics, because there's so many issues that are really important to rural communities, and it's been like amazing to see him jump in and do government when it's the last thing in the world I would have expected him to want to do.
And the thing that really, I guess, made things concrete for me is to realize that it was, at one point, it was Dustin's parents, Nick's parents, Evan's parents, my parents, our significant others, so many people reaching out on the phone, emails, just trying to get some traction, trying to get some help.
Yeah.
And so when I hear a constituent on the other end of the line, be it email or phone, I realized at one point that was our people trying to get help. And so it almost becomes like a solemn duty to return that at some level to try to help somebody.
Wow. So you're giving back what you didn't get.
Yeah, trying to, and then extending that into my own education. I want to go back. I want to go to law school ultimately, and join the efforts of Clint Lawrence and others that are reaching back to try to help the ones that are currently in Leavenworth. Nick can really speak to that because he's been tracking those cases.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Dustin, what affected you the most and made you the maddest at the judicial system?
Oh, well, that's an open-ended question. I could go on for hours on that aspect, but
was there one pinpointed situation, one thing that made you really pissed?
I guess the thing that made me frustrated the most through this whole thing is, like, right towards the end of our trial, they actually came up and they showed us pictures of AK rounds that were taken from the scene. And, none of that got given to us till midway. They gave us a name of the drone guy that had the drone footage, and just the way that things were hidden and stacked against us, I think, was the biggest biggest thing that kind of didn't sit right with me, because I mean, everybody thinks that when they go to a trial, right, they're thinking that it's a jury of their peers. Well, there was no combat veterans, nobody that's actually been in our shoes, and then to have things cherry picked that goes in, and then they don't give us everything just due to the amount of files and everything that was given. I mean, it's, if we would have had a fair, unpolitical trial, then I think the outcome would have been different. But when you get politics playing in the trial, it just doesn't go well at all.
How did you feel about the progress from that point?
Well, so I don't know how to answer your question, because the thing is like they started hitting us with things, and then like when Nick's trials were going on, you know, new stuff kept coming out all the time, and it's hard to process that into word. Having the FBI showing up a couple weeks later to an unsecure scene that had already been sanitized. You had people saying that they went and did a walk on the scene. I mean, I guess that's the biggest frustration that I've got, is all we wanted was a fair shake.
Yeah.
They would have won if they would have got a fair shake. So that wouldn't have helped the government at all. But
No.
yeah, I mean, what the most frustrating, I know you didn't ask me this, but the most frustrating thing for me when I listened to Dustin is that when they got pardoned and we were, you know, elated, I actually had people that were coming at me on social media who were my friends from, you know, one of them was a mentor who I worked for when I was in college, who was getting all upset with me because I was involved in it. And I just, you know, and then we had this one of the FBI investigators write this story on the CNN website, and I literally took it and deconstructed it. He was lying and lying and lying, and I pointed it out on my Facebook page, and I put the document that showed that he was lying on every single one of these. I mean, the post was probably like 12 pages long. Wow. I put every single court document that refuted what he was saying, and I got nothing back from the other members of the media. I mean, we had the UN talking about, you know, this was a terrible crime against humanity and all this other stuff. And I'm like, you know, they need to shut up until they read this case. It's like no one is interested in what the real situation is. So it's almost like just, you know, shouting into the dark because these people just don't want to hear it. They don't care about these massive violations of people's rights, and they won't care about it until it's done.
I'm going to bring up a name that I saw Paul's post to Royce, and that's all I'm going to call him for now, on social media just earlier in the week. This guy's still a problem. I mean, this judge is still doing stuff that's causing a continuation of this derelict duty that he's got. I mean, what's his future? What do you guys see? Like, is there any way that he can be held accountable for what he's done?
That's a really big question, and to get a judge removed from the bench is probably one of the biggest hurdles there is in our republic.
I mean, he's older than dirt. He needs to be off the bench anyway. So he should have taken senior status, and he didn't. Yeah. You know, he was the only judge in something like 189 years to have been removed from a case by the appellate attorney. I mean, what does that tell you?
No
One
kidding.
judge in almost 200 years who was so corrupt that he got removed from a case.
Has anybody researched any of the other cases that he's been involved with? Because, I mean, you know, obviously this isn't the first time he's done this, and obviously it's not going to be the last time. And so has anybody taken that on to say, hey, let's get at this guy?
Yeah, before their case, a law professor at George Washington Law School wrote an academic paper about him. And they deconstructed, it was about one particular case, the case that he eventually got kicked off of, but that happened after the academic paper was published. But he was saying, you know, this guy there's something wrong with him mentally. because he's sanctioning people. At this point, he decided that the government was wrong about this particular case that this guy was analyzing. He sanctioned something like 80 attorneys, and not just the people in the DOJ, but he was sanctioning their investigators and their secretaries and stuff like that. He told the National Park Service that they had to take their websites down so that all the people who were trying to get into the national park, like they had reservations on that website, that threw into total chaos. This is the same judge that was listening to their case. So, I mean, I don't know. Somebody has to make a motion to impeach him, and that hasn't happened yet.
So somebody somewhere up higher the chain made the call to make sure that he was in that case.
Yeah, because I feel like, well, he took the case away from another judge. So Judge Urbina had it the first go around.
Right.
He dismissed it in 2009, New Year's Eve 2009, and then he retired. Okay, so when the appellate court decided to bring it back, it got assigned to a different judge, Judge Leon, right?
Right.
Judge Leon. And we have a piece, the timestamped document that says that it went to Judge Leon. And then 20 minutes later, Judge Lambert just said, you know what? Nope, that's mine. He was the chief judge of the circuit at the time, and he was like, I'll take that one. And he just took it. No reason. Took it.
Wow. The details and the pieces that are in there that you've put together to show just how twisted and how corrupt this situation was is overwhelming. And there's such an overwhelming case against just the judge and the judicial process. I mean, when you talked about the jury being your peers, you're right. None of them have been to battle. None of them have ever experienced anything like that. And obviously they were cherry-picked somehow. But
well, they were cherry-picked because they were in Washington, D.C. The case should have been held in Salt Lake City.
Right.
That's where they were first arrested. And in fact, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers in their amicus brief said that this was a violation of their rights because they weren't being tried in the place where they lived. So it could have been Salt Lake City, which is where Donald Ball was from. It could have been, I mean, I don't know if you have a federal courthouse in Denton. There isn't one in Denton, right?
No, there'd be one in Dallas.
Right. So it would have either been Salt Lake City, Dallas, or whatever Sparta's closest to, or New Hampshire.
Right.
Right. So it would have been, can you imagine what the result would have been if it would have been in any of those places? It wouldn't have been like this.
No, it sure as heck wouldn't have been like that at all. Not even remotely close. Where is Eric Holder to this day? What is he doing now?
I have no idea. That's a very good question. It's kind of a blessing that we're not hearing about him.
Interesting, right? Interesting. Tell me, Dustin, what's going on in your life now that's all behind you and it's all over? Where's the future? What's your plans? Where do you want to go? And what sparked you to go to the new places that you're going in your life?
So whenever I got out, we went from 6 years, 2 months in prison to next thing we know is we're out on the street. It's like, okay, you're free, little buddy, take off.
Right.
So each one of us has had to rebuild our life in our own way. I ended up putting together a small business. I own a small liquor store here in my hometown. I currently rep for C&G Holsters, and then I do dirt work on the side because it takes a lot of things to keep what I have going on. So I stay super busy, and that's how I like to live my lifestyle I like working multiple jobs to where, I can have my hand in a lot of things. If you can't do one thing really well, then you need to do a bunch of things. So I'm the guy that I try to do a bunch of things just to keep things going. And, I try to get to see my kids as much as I can. I spent the summer traveling. My son and I drove Tennessee back, and, we came to Texas, and I took him back to Tennessee, and we spent a lot of FaceTime in the windshield having a great summer. So, we had it hard, but our families, our children also had it hard. It's one of those that, yeah, we did 6 years, 2 months, but so did they. And just trying to get back to coming back and getting your life together. I mean, look, whenever I first got out, without our supporters that came in and helped us, and that has been one of the biggest things that I'm so thankful through this whole process, is that we've had people that have shown support. We've had people that's helped us. And without those folks, I mean, it would have been bad, because I got out and I didn't have a home to go to. I didn't have anything. So what I ended up doing, without having to go live with family, is I got a teeny tiny apartment, and I loved it. It beat the hell out of a prison cell. So, it's the biggest thing that I guess I could say about this is, when you have to start over in life, sometimes it's not a bad thing. Sometimes it's a great thing, but you just got to figure out how to keep fighting and keep it going.
That's awesome. That's great advice. Great testament too. I don't think a lot of people understand that you guys literally got the notification, and they hustled you out of prison as fast as they could get you and put you back on the street. It's like, oh shit, we screwed up. It's been decided. Trump is the man. Poof, off you go. Goodbye. And I mean, did you get cab fare? did they get you a bus to go home?
Hell no. So my family, when Pete Hegseth basically told us that the pardon was imminent, he just didn't have any idea. My family actually got in a vehicle and drove out, because I was in USP Atlanta, and they were hanging out at a lady's cabin that she let us use for my family, because it was pretty close. That way, we didn't know if it was going to be a week, a month, or what. And they were there waiting for the call. And as soon as we walked out of the door, I mean, I took what personal belongings and stuff that I wanted out of prison, but that's all I walked away with. And the set of clothes on my back and whatever that I wanted to carry out. And so, you walk out of the door and it's like, okay, now what? And it was challenging.
Yeah, I'll bet it was. I mean, when Pete Hegseth said, okay, it's coming down, how much time between then and when you were released? How much time was there?
What, about a week?
11 days.
11 days.
So
11 days.
A buddy of mine had a cell phone that I was using to communicate with my wife, because it was COVID and there was lockdowns and it was undetermined. It was a mess.
That's right, too.
So I was using the cell phone to communicate through Messenger, and she let me know that, what Dustin had said, that the pardons were coming, but basically leave it to just the families. Don't discuss it with anyone. And I think that's where it landed. So she responded with how long, and the White House counsel's office responded back with about a week. Well, 7 days had come and gone, and nothing happened. Nothing occurred. So we were starting to wonder, oh shit, did we get on the cutting room floor because of all the different things that were going on at the time?
Wow.
Yet did it not come through? And 11 days later, I was standing in line waiting on a phone call, and a female walks into the housing unit and calls out my name. And I was thinking at the time it was a male issue or something, who knows. But it was remarkable, because typically you don't hear a female's voice inside that male prison. So
no kidding.
My cellie walks up, it's like, hey, they're calling for you. You need to get over there. And so he held my place in line, and I walk up to the door. The lady says, I need you to come in and shut the door. No, ma'am, I can't do that. You're a cop. That's not going to happen. And so she hands me the copy of the pardon. She says, I think you can. I need a phone number. You got 10 minutes. You can't be on this compound anymore.
Wow.
Mine was a little different, because I was in jail, and they had actually lost me. They didn't know where I was. So
they lost you in the jail.
So basically what happened was, when you searched me on the database, it said in federal custody, but it did not have a location. So they called DC, the U.S. Marshals there. They loved me, because they had to deal with me for 3 trials. They loved me. And so the lower ranking guys from our first trial were the guys in charge for my 3rd trial. They had been promoted over that 5-year period. And he actually drove in the middle of the night from Washington out there to Rappahannock and like woke them up and was like, "Hey, do you not answer your phone? Like, let this go." So I only had to wait like an hour and a half, but it was really refreshing. I was talking to my sister on the phone, and she's like, "Yeah, all your boys are out, your brothers are free," and I was just like, "Man, it was amazing just to have that relayed to me." So, yeah.
Well, to Nick's point, when she told me that we had received a pardon and she needed a phone number, as soon as I got on the phone with Kristen, because there was some back and forth about Nick had been mentioned in a previous article, but the rest of us weren't. And then we were mentioned in another article and he wasn't. It was kind of just some messaging. So I asked Kristen, I said, "Is it all four of us?" And she said, "Yeah, it's all four. You're coming home. It's over with."
Wow. Evan, did you know it was all happening simultaneously, or how did you approach that?
I really had no idea. I think I might have heard, certain rumors, but the most that I remember was that they were pushing for the pardon, and they would always have, somebody was going to talk to Trump about it, and somebody was going to play golf with Trump, and they were going to bring it up, and like all these rumors. So things would
Wow.
just kind of come across the phone, like my mom would tell me, and I'd kind of like not get too excited about it. I'd just be like, "Oh, okay, that sounds good." Of course, you want to believe it's going to come true, but you don't want to put all your hope in something like that because it's a long shot. So around that time, on the day we got pardoned, my prison was on lockdown because we had a lot of cases of COVID. So everyone was in their cells, and we had been like that for months.
Wow.
And there's probably 120 people in my unit, and there was one person that was allowed to come out of the cell every day to do certain things, clean, and pretty much do favors for the other inmates. Really, is what it turned into. And that person was me, because I don't know about the other guys, but anytime there was some job where you needed somebody that was halfway normal and that wasn't going to steal things and wasn't going to cause problems, they would come to me. So the first day we got locked down, they came to my cell and they said, "Hey, you're the only one on this list to be the orderly." And I'm like, "I don't want to do that," because they were saying you have to clean the showers, and I was like, "I don't want to clean the showers." And with all the COVID stuff going on, I was like, "No, I'm not doing that. Find somebody else." They left. About 30 minutes later, they come back. "Hey, man, we talked to the whoever, and you're the only one. You're the only one we can trust. Come on, dude, it'll be good. We'll let you out every day. You can do your workout. You just got to spray the showers down." So I accepted it, and it ended up being a good thing because every day at 7 a.m. they'd unlock my cell, and I had free reign of the unit, except for the other inmates asking me for favors. That was the only bad thing. So on that day of the pardon, it was about 5 or 6 at night, and they had already opened my door because I was supposed to come out and do my duties.
Right.
But I didn't want to go out because I didn't want to get asked to do favors. So I was just kind of sitting in my bed reading, and the CO came back and swung the door open, and he was all frantic. And he's like, "Liberty, are you ready for this?" And I'm like, I thought I was in trouble. I thought I was in trouble for passing certain things during the lockdown, or I don't know if they were looking at the cameras. So uh, I was like, "Ready for what?" He's like, "Sit down." And I'm like, I'm laying down. What? He's like, "Pack your shit. Trump just pardoned you." So I was like, "No way. He did it?" And he's like, "Yeah, he did it. Pack your shit." I'm like, "I'm not packing anything. I put my shoes on. I'm like, you can keep this shit." I picked up one book. I picked up one book that I had and my pictures. I put my shoes on and walked right out of the cell, and they brought me to the office, and I was kind of freaking out. I asked to call my brother, so I called my brother to let him know, and they were scrambling to get me like a hotel room and all that type of stuff. So that took maybe 20 minutes, and then they were going to walk me from my unit to the front administration building and then out on the street. So as I stepped out of my unit, I asked the CO if I could, say bye to one of my friends that was in another unit, and he said, "Yeah, go ahead." But before I could do it, I guess the news had come on CNN, and since I had been in that prison for so long, everybody knew me. So everyone started kind of cheering me on out the cell windows, and like, "Yeah, I told you Trump was gonna help you," and like cheering me on as I was walking down the walkway. And they walked me to the front. They asked me a few security questions to make sure it was me, and then they just walked me out front of the prison. A CO drove me to a hotel and just dropped me off, and then that was all she wrote. And the funny thing is, that CO that was driving me to the hotel, he was my boss for one of the jobs I had in there. He's like, "Hey man, uh I don't want you to get offended, but they asked me to ask you if you knew any information about who's getting into drugs in the compound." I was like, "Fuck that." I'm like, "I'm not doing that now. I got nothing to win." I'm like, "I have no idea, dude. Sorry." And then
Yeah.
they dropped me off, and that was all. That was all she wrote.
Well, apparently it was a good thing that you were halfway normal.
Yeah, I got some benefits for as far as jobs go.
Wow, that's wild stuff. Wild
It's
stuff.
funny. I'm considered normal there. I'm considered normal in prison. I
Well,
don't know if people would say that on the street.
I don't know. You look pretty normal to me. I mean,
Yeah.
wasn't Paul? How what was that quote? Oh, who's this nice gentleman here?
Yeah.
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 Meanwhile,
Oh,
the
did these guys tell you the time that one of the first times we went to court, we weren't sure what entrance to go in, and we were kind of just hanging out in the back dock and trying to figure out how to go in, and a couple marshals came up, and since we're all in suits and we kind of looked the part, we were asking them, "Hey, how do we get in there? We're supposed to be in this courtroom." The marshal let us in the back, and by the time he figured out who he was, he almost shit himself. He's like, "Holy shit, you're defendants?" So he's like, "No, you got to go in through the front."
That's right.
wow. So a little bit different first impressions with the people who unfortunately couldn't make any decisions about it.
Yeah.
I remember when your pictures were plastered all over every media screen. CNN and NBC, all those guys were creating this delusion of how horrible you were. And looking at the photographs, it's like, what kind of picture are you painting? It was so obvious that it was corrupt. I want to go back to something. We had a conversation a couple of weeks back. You weren't part of that conversation yet, Evan, because we couldn't get you hooked up because you're in an undisclosed location. But Paul brought something up about, and I'm going to quote you, Paul, and hopefully we can get back to that. You were talking about street respect. You were talking about distance and your own personal space and how that was a different take for you when you got out. I think, do you remember that conversation at all?
Yeah, between you and I, for sure.
It was when we were talking on our last little setup for this podcast. Can you bring that up again? Because that was something that I really wanted to capture, just the way you spoke about that.
Are you talking about just kind of the difference in mentality from coming from that environment into the free world?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think for me, in my experience, on the inside, everything was. At times, it was a lot just like kind of like a beehive. It was always just buzzing,
right?
And so everybody was really on their P's and Q's, and so much so that bumping or just like barely bumping somebody. Excuse me. It becomes habit.
Right.
Walking in front of somebody. You're always careful to say excuse me, and just any little thing that could be taken as an offense. You're just careful with how you deal with people, and obviously the pace of life in there is so much slower and very routine, very scheduled.
Right.
So then you come out into the free world, you're completely free. It's almost like you're out into the wild,
right.
And it's just a different mindset, different mentality. And there was one moment when Chris and I went to the grocery store right after I got out.
Right.
This kid had his earbuds in. He was just working, not paying attention. And he walks in front of Kristen. And my first reaction was to grab this kid by the scruff and just go to town. Because he didn't disrespect me, he disrespected my wife. And that's just like a 2.0 version of jumping on somebody's stuff. So anyway, yeah, it was a shift. It was a ratcheting down of expectations, and it's a different life. It just is. And to Dustin's point earlier, you go from being in captivity to boom, here you go, here's your life, go make it happen. Kristen and I even got to the point where our cups were so full at the end of the day, we had nothing for each other. And our nervous systems were pretty shot, honestly. Because we had been living in survival mode for so long, especially her being a single mom, moving a career forward, trying to help us with our pardon efforts. And I think Michael Burgess said she was the one woman who walked soles off her shoes up and down the halls of Congress just to try to get some help.
Yeah.
And so then we're cast into the environment of now we're a family. We're supposed to, it's supposed to look a certain way, sound a certain way, operate a certain way.
Right.
Everybody's expectations are just like mashing down from the top. And so we decided to really kind of go the nuclear option, move to St. Petersburg, Florida, and try to reset our family and reset our nervous systems. I took a job with a nonprofit at the time, which ended up being a complete disaster, along with the for-profit. Obviously, a lot of lessons learned there, but in the interim, we were able to reconnect as a couple and as a family, and really only now they're starting to set a path forward of what our future looks like. What is it, 5 years, 5.5 years after the release from that environment. And so,
yes.
And we've all had our own journeys. We've all had our own reconnection to the free world in our own ways. And so it's interesting even now to hear it from Dustin, from Evan, from Nick. I think this is the first time all four of us have been together since the Sean Ryan show.
Wow.
One environment, yeah.
Oh. It was really interesting. You brought up the Sean Ryan show. I mean, the way that you guys spoke and I guess the atmosphere of that particular podcast was really enlightening, I think, again, from a lot of people. I don't think they really had a good handle on what was going on.
Yeah, that kind of was just something that came about from me listening to his show, and I followed him on Instagram, and I made a comment one time about maybe one of the videos that he posted, because he would do some great interviews with, military guys and Navy SEALs and Special Forces people. So I wrote him a simple message saying that I liked his content and that I was, former Marine and Blackwater guy. And I kind of just left it at that from what I remember. And then he wasn't really big at that point. He was kind of still growing his podcast. He was in the first few episodes.
Yeah.
I don't know how I ran across his YouTube channel, but he responded, and then I started a little dialogue, and I said, "Oh yeah, well, I was actually one of the guys involved in that Nisor Square thing." And then he says, "Oh wow, I'd really love to get you guys on the show." And I kind of wasn't really into it. I don't really like doing things like that, and I didn't want to relive the whole thing. I didn't want to bring more attention to us. But after thinking about it, I thought it was a good opportunity, to get our side of the story out. And he seemed like somebody that would give us, a great platform to do that. And
Right.
he did. He really helped us out. And yeah, it kind of all came together.
Tell me, Nick, one other question, and I want to totally redirect this, kind of what Paul and I were just talking about. What transitional stuff, I don't have a better word, did you feel when you got home? When you got back into civilian life, what was the first thing that, what were the things that were really imprinted in your brain from your experience inside and where you were coming outside?
Almost immediately, God put it on my heart that I have to go back to jail, that I have to go into the local jail, that I have to talk to the prisoners in there about Jesus. So
wow,
that was one of the first things that he really hit me with, and God blessed me with a wonderful wife. She was actually someone I met while I was locked up. She wrote me letters, and she rode with me the entire time I was locked up. And so I was quick to marry her. I'm glad that she said yes. So and we have a wonderful baby girl, and so it was just really fast paced. But the one thing that was heavy on me was prisoners.
When you put all this together and started to really dive into the case, what really sparked you? Like, what was it that made you passionate about it? Because I mean, you're super passionate about it, and it shows in the book. What drove you into, I've got to get this done?
It was, I think, there's two things, and several actually, that all occurred around the same time. One of them was coming to Alney to meet Dustin's kids and family, and then the second thing was the NACDL, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, writing their amicus brief, and everything in it was something that I had a problem with, and so it was a confirmation of everything that I thought about the case. And then I would say the fact that the DOJ gave those prosecutors awards.
Yeah.
That was just astonishing to me. It made me so angry because I just thought, wow, you ground these guys and their families into the dirt, and now you're giving yourself a prize for that. You violated their rights, and now you're going to congratulate yourself for that? I don't think so. So I think that was it. Like, I had the human aspect of it by seeing the effect of what this did to the families, and then just knowing that I was on solid ground with my doubts about the NACDL, endorsing them, and then just the self-congratulatory way that the government handled it. It was just horrible. It made me furious.
Right. Yeah, it's like I said, the passion that you have for the whole situation, and the fact that you brought so much to light for so many people to see is remarkable. And I think that you've done an incredible service to the boys that have had to endure what they've had to endure. I'm going to go back to you one more time, Nick. It's really amazing to see you in your faith, and to know that you're hanging out in prisons, helping guys there. That's pretty wild. That's pretty cool. What's the next step? Have you got a project in mind? Have you got a direction?
I've got all kinds. Daily, I just submit to the Lord, and the Holy Spirit, He just guides me, and He puts opportunities and people in front of me. And, Gina, with her courage to stand up and write this book, it's opening so many doors in all of our lives. Whatever avenue God has laid out for us, it is becoming apparently and just like a neon sign that there's good things in store for us, and we just got to keep our eyes focused on Jesus, and just continue to look out for our fellow man and fellow woman. My passion is soldiers that are incarcerated for war crimes, and I got into Calvin Gibbs's case when I early out of prison, and I just was immediately shocked that it had happened again. It was similar to our situation in a lot of ways, and he's locked up for something he did not do. So I appreciate you letting me talk about him. FreeCalvinGibbs.com, that's his website. If you can link that in, I'd appreciate it. And I'm pushing for the president to pardon him, because he's been locked up since 2010, and he's locked up for killing the Taliban.
Wow.
It's time for him to come home.
Wow. Amen. I will definitely link that to the podcast and post that as much as I can. Keep us in the loop on that, Nick, too. So the more information you can keep feeding, hey, we can talk about that on another podcast as well. I'd really be open to helping as best I can in any way.
God bless you. I appreciate that.
Likewise. Evan, what do you got planned? What's up your sleeve in the next 6 months?
Man, tell you the truth, I'm still kind of trying to find my way. When I got out of prison, I don't know about the other guys, but when I got out, it was a huge relief. And then kind of when the emotions settled a little bit,
Right.
I kind of thought, okay, well, wow, I'm pretty resilient. I think that didn't even fuck me up. Like normal people will go through that and they'd be totally out of it. And I'm like, oh, I feel exactly the same. Truth is, I don't think any of us are the same. I think it changes you. I mean, it could change you for the good, or it could change you for the bad, but it definitely does have an effect on you when you get out. And I kind of had to work through that stuff and find my way a little bit. Before we got locked up, uh, I had lived in Colombia for a long time, and through all the legal problems we had, I was always in Colombia. So when I got out of prison, I stayed in the States for maybe a year with my brother in my brother's house, and I was working a little bit, doing different security jobs, executive protection jobs. And then I got to a point where I'm like, why am I in DC when I don't really want to be in DC?
No doubt.
I'm gonna I'm gonna go back to Colombia and just do whatever the hell I want for a little bit because I deserve it, pretty much. So I came back and uh, I think I needed time outside the states just to like get away from all the noise. And I'm not gonna say I go off the grid, but I'm hard to contact a lot of times. Just recently, uh, I've been thinking about going back to the states because I need to start working and start being productive. And one thing that these guys hadn't mentioned, but technically we don't have a criminal history. That
Right.
the pardon is pretty complete as far as that goes. Like we could vote, we have all our rights. You could have a passport, you could buy a weapon, all that type of stuff. But I don't have anything planned as of right now.
Right. Dustin, where are you going? What's your future going to look like? What's your next plan? What's your next move?
I'm just going to keep on keeping on, man.
That's awesome.
I've got things rolling in the right direction. I just want to be here for my family and my children and, my friends. Just keep doing what I'm doing.
This podcast has given me an opportunity to get to know you guys a little bit, and I really appreciate this opportunity. I wish you all the best in the world, and I know that God will guide each and every one of you in a direction that's going to take you into the next phase of where you need to be. The impact that you guys have had in the world, and Nick talked about this a little bit. I mean, you're touching lives all over the place that you probably won't even hear about. But I just want you to know that from my small part, you've touched my life in a big way, touched my heart, and I respect all you guys to the top end. Gina, thank you so much for bringing this book public and making this such a prominent place in the world. I think it's really important for people to take that opportunity to read the book and to dig in and like all of you are saying, get involved. Paul, you said that, like, you can't fix this stuff from the outside. You gotta fix it from where you are. And I think that, moving forward in our lives, doing the things that we do and sticking true to our identities is the way to make some change in the world. And I think you're all making change. Again, I really appreciate you coming on board on the podcast. Anybody got anything they want to say before we shut her down?
I think you got it.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Gina. Y'all take care, and God bless your families and all the people that were friends with you and are friends with you more. I just, again, I can't express my appreciation for all you guys.
God bless you,
sir.
Thank
All
you.
right, you guys take care. Well, that wraps up another session of Only the Bare Facts, your destination for unfiltered stories, real-life lessons, and an unwavering commitment to the word of truth. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast, share it with your friends, and send me an email with your comments. You can find me on X, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, Facebook, and Truth Social. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast or can suggest someone that would bring truth to this world, contact me with more information. I hope this podcast finds all those truth warriors on a journey to find their true identity in divinity. Remember, the most celebrated artist in the world calls you his masterpiece. He sees you flawless in his grace. Live your life fully, knowing that you are righteous sons and daughters. Thank you for being a part of this journey.